Welcome everybody to the Synapse Philosophy Group. It is an amazing Tuesday night. We're in D.D. Palmer's The Chiropractor's Adjuster, 1910 by D.D. Palmer, page 275. We did a little bit of skipping. There's just some ranting we're skipping through, but we're getting to some good meat again, okay? So we're page 275. We're going to go through the second paragraph here and to 276. And Alan, why don't you start off reading for us if you don't mind? Is that okay?
No problem. And again, this is him arguing, and I'm not sure who he is debating with at this point, but the whole book, most of this book is D.D. responding to things that other people have written and in response, and his response related to chiropractic. So
can I pause us 1 second? One thing I forgot. Somebody asked a question, and I'm wondering if we can just mull it over for a second, okay? We'll come back to it. Do you know what page D.D. in D.D.'s 1910 I can find where he felt the beat of nerves? I don't remember reading that. And this is Chris Walker. He's a chiropractor in Augusta, Georgia. And he said, I remember reading it between about 180 and 200. This is long before we learned the speed of action potential. He said he couldn't find it. So I'm wondering if it was somewhere, if anybody knew where to find that. I'm not sure. I don't remember reading that about nerve pulse. Okay. It felt the beat of the nerves. So let's put that in our cap and we'll start looking at that too. Okay. I'll remind us all about that later on.
I'll
Okay.
make a note so I can look for it later too. And
okay. I'll send that out to the group. All right, Alan.
all right. So the quote here is, occlusion of stimulus is the cause of all abnormality. And D.D. responds, the amended glossary tells us that abnormality means having lost the equilibrium of function. An equilibrium is an equipoise, a state of rest, a cessation from motion, a mutual counteraction of two or more forces. Of stimulus, the glossary says the energy of force which acts through the brain and nerves, constructing and maintaining the body and controlling all its functions. It defines occlusion, suppression, checking, hindering, retarding, stopping, and lessening of nerve stimulus. And I just wanted to, my thought as I read that, energy of force which acts through brain and nerves, constructing and maintaining the body and controlling all its functions, that is pretty close to a definition of innate.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
He doesn't say that there, but that's pretty close to me.
And I think that's what his point was. And you're giving it as this different language. So, we hear it with different ears, right? Reading with different eyes. So absolutely. That's a clear description of innate intelligence.
So should I go on?
Yeah, keep going
As
on.
a clincher, the analyzer adds, quote, as a corollary to the fact that occlusion of stimulus causes all abnormality, the effect of a complete occlusion of stimulus in one nerve fiber is the death of that fiber beyond the point of occlusion, close quote. It is not, and then D.D. says, it is not a, quote, fact that occlusion of stimulus causes all abnormality, unquote. It is not a fact that occlusion imperfection, the transient approximation of the edges of natural opening causes all abnormality, disease. A large share of disease, all inflammatory and fever cases, are because of too much stimulus and not because it is shut off. Occlusion is the closing of an orifice. It is not the suppression, checking, hindering, retarding, stopping, or lessening of fluid, solid stimulus or energy. The closing of an opening may suppress, check, hinder, retard, stop, or lessen the passage of the nerve stimulus, but it does not excite, inflame, or cause fever. Occlusion is not the cause of disease.
Hold on. Let's pause right there. Let's pause a moment.
Get the rest of that sentence.
Yeah.
Because he says, nerves are impinged upon, pressed against, not squeezed or pinched.
And that's what I was going to get to, where he's talking about, because we talk about pinched nerves I use the analogy myself, the hose and all those things. But he's going to say, really, where we're not talking about occlusion, we're talking about nerve tension. And now our models really are going back towards what Dee Dee is really talking about. And this may relate to the question I got from, one of our people here too. But really interesting. I'm glad you paused on that. Anybody else?
Yes,
Carol,
I
you're
do.
dancing your head around there.
It also is something that we're really good in Western culture is taking things apart and not putting it back together. We've already know the MOPI definition of the subluxation. I'm really good focusing on the malposition. We're really good at focusing on the occlusion or the pressure or the interference when it's not any one of those by itself. It has to be all four. And I think that's a good point here too.
Well, I think he's also going to, nerves are impinged upon, pressed against, but not squeezed or pinched, right? So, impinged, they're pressed against, but they're not necessarily squeezed or pinched is what, that last sentence, that's why it was so important, because we talk about pinched nerves and people walk in all the time, I got a pinched nerve. And, but, he's getting into a more finite definition of our understanding of what's happening to that nerve, right? Which I think is very important, really.
As I've been reading this book, it's very clear. A lot of his arguments here are very specific about terminology.
Yes.
And he is very clear about defining things. And it's something that has been, pardon me, bastardized in many areas of our profession.
Oh.
Even some of our, focused upper cervical people write papers about, manipulation because they think they have to put that in there rather than instead of the other words,
Oh, yeah.
and it's to get them published. And it's I think that the terminology is critical. And as you read this book, Dee Dee is, everything he talks about here, I've started marking everything, marks the terminology. It's like every page I'm saying terminology, because it's so focused on it.
That's why he's calling it the chiropractor's adjuster. And he's getting us back, clearing up that garbage language people start using just by laziness half the time. And you're right about that. Absolutely, Alan. And how important it is to be specific. Our old mentors, Pasquale, Sigafus, everyone talked about how important our words are, and be careful what you're saying, because, words, one word is described in paragraphs, right? So we have paragraphs upon paragraphs of explanation in reality when we break things down. So our words and being very specific is very, very important. And that's where he's hitting home. Absolutely, Alan, how important it is for us to remain. Well, we've said this the last couple of our episodes too, of how it's important to be specific with our vocabulary. That's how the Romans were so successful. You change the language of the people you conquer. And then you own them. All right. Before we get into a rant, go ahead.
I think that also that I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Well,
if it comes back, I'll bring it around again. We can go on from here.
Equilibrium of function.
The equilibrium of function. Quote, the equilibrium of function, unquote, to bring the action or function of any organ to an equilibrium, a state of rest or cessation, would be death. Abnormality means anomalous, irregular, deviating from the rule. Carver's analysis, according to the science of chiropractic, is incorrect physiology.
Perfect.
Quote, the science of function and the science of adjustment, unquote. And Dee Dee responds, the adjustment of vertebrae or other joints is the act of adjusting, the placing of into proper relationships, those which were displaced. Accumulated and established knowledge of the qualities and functions of living tissues, systematized and formulated with reference to general truths pertaining to the normal or special action or of a part or an organ, might be classified as the science of functions. And Dee Dee continues here, adjusting is an art, not a science. The person may be able to adjust vertebrae, may do so without any scientific knowledge of the reason for doing so. They learn it as an art. They know how, but not why. The art of adjusting should be guided by scientific knowledge. I think that's a good place to stop for a
Yeah,
minute.
that's a great place to start. They learn it as an art. They know how, but not why. You know, why, a person may be able to adjust vertebra. Many do so without any scientific knowledge for the reason of doing why. Well, who are those people? Really, I guess the ones that are not trained by Didi, right? Because he's saying a lot of people are adjusting these vertebra but don't know why. I'm sure they learned about the science of chiropractic from Didi Palmer, all the research that he did. The art of adjusting should be guided by scientific knowledge. So you need to have the whole package, is what he's saying, right?
I don't remember if this particular part is in response to Davis, but Davis, he keeps going back to a book
Carver
called Neurology that talked about osteopathy and neurology and chiropractic. It's three separate things. And he goes back and forth talking about that all the time.
Well, this was from Carver, right? He's
Carver,
rebuting Carver, who he goes on about Carver. This is 277 pages. He's only missed a few in mentioning Carver and how wrong he is.
Yeah.
All right. So where I go from here, I actually skip to page 280 because he's just going to the apertures of the skull. It's a little bit more of like, a physiology class, if you ask me. And then I skipped all the way to the bottom page of 280 and 280 to 281. The sick need help, not drugs nor incantations. Chiropractors often deal with this next. We're 280 at the first paragraph where I see really it starts to get a little bit better. What do you think? Where do you have yours?
The next thing I have marked is actually halfway down 82.
I only marked that one thing. The sick need help, not drugs, nor incantations.
I marked that too, yeah.
Because you're really talking about, concept therapy. That's who Carver was bringing in concept therapy. And that's where he's saying these incantations as well. I think that's another Carver shot. And then I skip over to a little bit. All right, go ahead.
He's saying here, and I'll start at the second paragraph on 82, where he says, the above sounds much like allopathy, from which Dr. Davis graduated 48 years ago. That education in measure sticks to him and is visible in many places in neuropathy. Harry points on page 448, indeed, quote, indeed, some cases moderate fever probably aids the body in combating or rather conquering disease which has attacked it, unquote. And then Didi responds, the old school of medicine look upon disease as an enemy which must be conquered, subdued, vanquished, routed, driven out. They declare war. They muster their forces, arm themselves with death-dealing poisonous drugs. They have quite a combat, a great fight, and imagine they come off the battlefield victorious. Davis and Ayer think fever a body renovator, that it renews, restores the body to its former vigor, purity, freedom from poison. Therein lies the principle of vaccination. Nature has a house cleaning and should not be molested. Nature has a house cleaning and should not be molested in her domestic work. According to this view, fever is a kind of chemical combustion. Neuropathy 610, quote, decomposition may ensue from two causes. The one being due to disturbance of the nerve centers producing paralysis, nerve filaments all along the line of their terminals, and the other from the pressure somewhere along the course of the nerve in and of its surface or at its terminal. The quote continues, in all fevers, the friction is caused by decomposition of the elements. Then Didi says, the doctor mixes allopathy and chiropractic, the principles of which are antipodal. I'm going to skip a little bit, another quote there. It says, may it not as well be that the two forces should be separated.
Now, I just want to go back a little bit.
And that by uniting, they cause troubles. This causes disease.
Alan, just one moment, please, because where he says the doctor that mixes allopathy and chiropractic, the principles of which are antipodal. And antipodal means related to or situated on the opposite sides of the earth. Okay. I think that's an extremely important thing because so often chiropractors, we're all mixed up trying to do allopathic work. I see it on a lot of the pages, especially the infant pages. I teach infant adjusting, and I see half the chiropractors are trying to diagnose all sorts of ridiculous diseases. And, no one's even saying, get this baby to hold their atlas adjustment at least. And they're constantly fiddling around with things, trying to drug them with anti-whatevers and acting as allopaths instead of chiropractors. We're going down that slippery slope right now. And it's the reason why we have to go out and teach the people about chiropractic. It's why I'm going to Kansas City in December. It's important. And hopefully I don't know if we're going to do Atlanta or Spartanburg, but I think we might do Spartanburg in January. I think it might be we're going to have a blast. Mason's been to I think you went to the third module of innate adjusting. I'm glad you came to that one, Mason.
Yeah, I'm glad you sent the invite.
Well, that's why we do it, because chiropractors are getting so mixed up, and mostly because their teachers don't know what to teach them because they're mixed up. So, we have to get out there and teach. That statement right there is very important to me as a chiropractor. And then later on, he mentions it's very difficult to change the medical fighter into the peaceful chiropractor. And what's happened, we've become medical fighters as chiropractors. So our identity is lost. So of course, also our reader is lost. He probably lost his internet. And, where I was going next with this is 285. There's a really cool poem here. And I wonder if anybody would like to read it. Barry, you got your book?
I do. The School Child Up to Date. Is that the poem?
Yeah.
Okay. Page 285, The School Child Up to Date by Elsie Duncan Yell in Life, parentheses. Make haste to school, my little child, or else you will be late. Your books are all aseptic now, and here's your sterile slate. Your pencil has been boiled an hour. 'Tis germless now, I hope. And don't forget to wash your desk with this carbolic soap. And lest about the schoolroom floor, some unseen microbes lurk. Just sprinkle formalin around before you set to work. You'd better put, for safety's sake, bichloride in the ink, and water that has not been boiled, you must not dare to drink. Of course, when recess comes around, some food you'll want to munch. So in this disinfected box is pre-digested lunch. And since 'tis said that in a kiss, bacteria may dwell, I may not give you, as I'd like, a mother's fond farewell.
Is it much different from 1910 of over sanitizing the world? I mean, this is 1910. It's like my neighbor down the street with their, the house smells like bleach from the street. So, things haven't changed very much of this fear mongering of the outside, right? I mean, is that what you expect to read from 1910? I didn't think people were thinking that way. Interesting. All right. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Haig, I was thinking about your last comment about the medical fighters becoming chiropractic. What did you say again? What was it?
The peaceful chiropractors. That's from Dede.
Becoming peaceful chiropractors. So his first two graduates were medical doctors.
Yeah.
And even when he was in Davenport, going from magnetic healing to chiropractic, he approached the medical doctors to say, hey, let me teach you this new thing I found. And I'm looking at that phrase and what you just said as, I'm thinking that his mindset is he wanted to turn medical doctors into chiropractors.
That's really interesting you say that. I've thought about that too, is that he thought, hey, look, I've got this thing. They're going to be thrilled about it. And, what have you. and saw that, hey, I have my own this dogma, and you've got to chisel through that concrete to get to, to understand this thing. And yeah, it's interesting.
And he also almost passed away at a train accident in Clinton, Iowa, a few years after Harvey's adjustment. BJ was 13 at the time, so he also wanted to know, like, hey, this profession's not going to continue. It's got to be at the right time, at the right place, with the right person. The universe has to sync together like it did him finding it. So, he changed his mind. We all do. We all change our mind if we have, close episodes with death.
And well, he thought thought through it like, wow, okay, we've got to really protect this. I could go at any minute and then it'll be all gone. But was BJ, I did the math once a long time ago that BJ was 13 when he delivered the adjustment to Harvey Lillard.
Yes, he was.
Okay, so you were just saying a couple of years later he was 13 years old, but is that?
Sorry, a couple of years later after the first adjustment, he was involved in a close train accident in Clinton Junction, Iowa. And DD at the time of the first adjustment was 50, BJ was 13.
BJ was 13, yes, okay. Because he even said, because when BJ said, he was talking about having it was an Atlas adjustment. One of the things DD said is he was just a lad. How would he remember where I was adjusting up here, down there, what have you? Okay, Alan just sent me a text. He said his computer's, he's trying to get back on, but his computer just froze up. Okay. Okay. Well, that's all good stuff. Absolutely. Anybody else or anything else?
So I just wanted to kind of rewind a little bit, a few pages. And when we were speaking about, what's the word?
Antipodal?
No, equilibrium.
Yeah.
So I always found that I disliked using equilibrium because I felt that it was more allopathic than, say, coordination, referencing Principle 32. And so I just find it more chiropractic to use coordination versus equilibrium, because we want the body in a state of coordination so it can adapt to fight or flight, or rest and digest. I just think that, I don't know, I wanted to bring that up.
Well, and that's a good point. And realize he's making language that hasn't been used before in describing things that haven't existed before then, right? There's very often when we've been reading, like he's describing quantum physics way before anybody, it was even a thought, right? And he's creating new language. And so, I see your point 100%. He's also following along with what he has studied and creating a language that even the medical man should be able to understand. And he's refuted a lot of their books, or even just shown how inadequate the medical books actually are. And so most of this, what he's done is look through so much terminology, and the research that Dee had done at this point, brand new research that no one even ever thought of before, was truly cutting edge at this time. I mean, it really deserves for me, I'm in awe of the amount of work that he did, truly. But
Mason, yeah, it really is. Mason, you really got me thinking there. That's great, because in today's current philosophy and science, we would say coordination, because that's putting the philosophy, science, and art at use, because we're not here just to make shoulders straight, pelvis straight, atlases straight. That's a Nate's job, and that requires coordination. So that's a key point, and that's something that I would keep pushing to fellow students, your fellow peers, your fellow practice members, is that your goal is to help your body have coordination, not be in equilibrium, not be in balance, because truly does that exist? No.
Agreed. Thanks for that.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm going over to page, I have the smallest baby on 290. Okay, how do you guys feel? I like these little parts because he's very descriptive in them. Is there anything that I skipped that you guys want to read?
You skipped brainstem, you skipped medulla oblongata back there on 280. I'm just kidding. Haig.
I did. I probably did. Where did he say medulla oblongata?
Actually, he did.
Really?
Medullary oblongata. Page
Medullary
280.
oblongata.
Yeah.
All right. You want to read that section?
Now I'll read. You want me to read the smallest baby? I'll read that.
Of course I do.
Okay. Little Miss Cade weighed 13 ounces when born. She now weighs 19 pounds. The tiny bit of humanity was born at St. Helens, Oregon. She was so small that she could be placed in a small teacup and completely hid by another. Her hands and feet were the size of a rat's foot. Her head is large as a bantam egg. That's a type of chicken. She is perfectly formed. Over a year ago, there was born to Mr. and Mrs. Chance of Wichita, Kansas, a babe who weighed 15 ounces when she was 3 weeks old. She was perfect in form. In 1904, Mr. and Mrs. Beatty of Stedman, Missouri were the parents of a 1-pound male child. A finger ring passed over the hand and up to the elbow. My mother weighed 1.5 pounds when born. She was one of a pair of twins, and the other died. I came within one of not having any mama. I am glad that they saved what was there of my mama.
And the reason why I think that's important really is, when we have these children are born, preemies and, tiny little babies. The smallest baby I've ever adjusted was 1.125 pounds and literally laid in my hand, like, just almost filling up the whole hand, not even the whole hand. And, if it wasn't for, saving his mother and, he wouldn't be here. There are so many variables, but we would not have had Dee Dee Palmer. It was a close call. All right. Now, subluxations of approximation of vertebra, the cause of impingement. On 293, we're getting in a little deeper now. Okay. And this is a little bit more of the story. You guys want to start this section or you have more to discuss? I think we should go. You want to do it, Barry?
I sure will.
Go for it.
Page 293, subluxation or approximation of vertebrae, the cause of impingement. A man of 80 years is from 2 to 3 inches shorter than he was at the age of 25 years. This shortening of the spinal column that comes with age is mostly or entirely at the expense of the intervertebral cartilages. When from 2 to 3 inches is deducted from the combined thickness of all the segments of the intervertebral discs or cartilages, which is originally about 4 to 5 inches, there must be a loss of nearly 1/2 of the thickness of the intervertebral cartilages. The difference in the height of a man at 25 and 80, barring abnormal curvatures and luxations, considering the natural shortening or approximation of the vertebrae, does not exceed 1 inch, usually less than 1/2 inch. This shrinkage must be divided between the 29 articulations from occiput to ankle. A slight bending of the neck of the femur should be considered. Dividing this contraction between all the articulations, it would average 1/13 of an inch. It should also be remembered that the spinal nerves become slightly firmer and narrowed in diameter as age advances, and we might also say slightly contracted in length. When we consider that the spinal cord is freely movable within the spinal canal and that the spinal nerves are afforded ample space for their emergence from the intervertebral foramina, we will see that normal movement do not compress either the spinal cord or spinal nerves. The very slight difference in the size of the spinal foramina between the age of 25 years old and 80 would not be worth considering. How much of a squeeze would be made on the first pair of cervical nerves? Take into consideration the play, the amount of space between the occipital and the posterior arch of the atlas, and the size of the nerves which pass out over the grooves, and that between the atlas and the occiput, there is no intervertebral cartilage, only a very thin hyaline articular cartilage which, if half of its thickness was shrunken, or if it was all absorbed, would make no appreciable difference in the gap between the atlas and the occiput, sufficient to compress or pinch a nerve. Even if such were the case, would not the bending of the head forward ever so relieve the compression?
So, this is where we want to get into the atlas and the cervicals and all that. Maybe I skipped a little bit. I did go back and look and skim through there. I don't want to miss any medulla stuff, we can go back to that. But, at this point, he probably knows more spinal anatomy than most of the medical world right now. Okay. And it's just beautiful stuff. Not easy to get cadavers back in those days, I would imagine. I have really no idea. But I think this is a great statement, really. He's giving us the spinal anatomy right now. Right? What do you guys think?
I agree. 1/5, 1/13 of an inch from 25 to 80. He's explaining this anatomy. This is extremely detailed with the anatomy and the orthopedic movements that are involved and the neurology.
Well, I mean, it's a very, this is, major. I have a world-renowned anatomist who is his name's Gil Headley. I use a lot of his pictures in my slides. He's my neighbor. And to see some of the dissections he does now with modern tools are amazing. To be able to get to this level where he's describing right now is very difficult dissection, okay? Especially if they're not preserved the way they are now. And getting into that body has to be so fresh to be able to see that cartilage at that level. Do you see what I mean? And to be able to measure it, okay? Truly amazing stuff, I think that's super cool. You're thinking in 1910, or really before 1910, really, this is about, right? Well, the goal was really to get to about page 300. We're almost there, okay? Putting this stuff in, we like to make it practical too. Mason's just in practice now. He just graduated. Congratulations from Parker. I'm stoked for you. We've kind of been chatting on and off for about almost 2 years. I'm excited for you, Mason. And, now you're serving your people in North Carolina. And, the world is better for that. I truly appreciate your service to humanity. All right.
Thank you.
We're on the shoulders of giants, and it's so hard and easy to forget it. But when you realize it, like, wow, how we've gotten here by all of this work from these amazing people, especially Dee Dee and BJ, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, Ed, this tonight really gets me that a lot of times you hear people say, and like even Wikipedia and other places, like, oh, the birth of chiropractic came from a goldfish mongrel and a magnetic healer. Yes, you are correct. You also don't realize how educated he was in the anatomy and the neurology. And it goes from his upbringing, being a farm boy in Canada with, his mother's twin sister died. He was oldest child. He had to help out. He studied animal bones. He was always searching for health. And why did one person get sick in a house and the others didn't? He was striving for that. And he did not find his true calling of chiropractic until he was 50 years old.
Yeah.
I'm not even 50, and I've been doing this for 25 years. And
Yeah.
Look what he did from 50 years old on. And it really, like you were saying, rests on the shoulders of giants. Dee Dee was literally bigger than life, truly connected, truly intelligent, bigger than life.
And when you get to the spiritual stuff, when we're reading in like 1914 and a lot more in this book as we get deeper through this, it's not just the work that he did in the physical world and the research and the anatomy, but then taking us and giving us such a rich and deep philosophy of chiropractic and of life itself. Truly amazing the work that this man did. And, when people say that, you think about early, 19th century, okay, mid 19th century, who wasn't a farm boy working somewhere, no matter what you did, from the Rockefellers or whomever, coming from the fields, you find that passion, and that passion just I bet Didi couldn't probably do anything else. He was focused on what he was doing with full fervor, just like BJ. And like I say, it's just like a musician. I love old school rock and roll, and you listen to some people that copied some of that stuff now, but those guys invented that sound. They invented that. The jazz players, they invented those sounds from way back. It didn't exist before then. Now it's commonplace to us. We can't forget that, So thank you for that, Barry. Absolutely poignant. I appreciate it. So this leads me to the next thing. Kind of my goal was to get to about page 300. I love Didi Palmer, and I'm thinking going back to 1914 again and reading that, or BJ's The Palmer's Laws of Life, okay, which is another extremely good book. I think it's volume 32, Palmer's Laws of Life, volume 34, 1958. So not too far before our masterpiece, and that's a good one. What do you guys think? Let's do a little communication. What do you guys think where we should go? Or do you want to stay here in Didi? The one thing about Didi is taking it in chunks and going back and forth to it is what we've done. But what do you guys think?
I'd have to get a copy of Palmer's Law of Life. I'm okay with staying here, but I would just need a little bit of time to get my hands on whichever ones I have. No, I don't. Never mind. I don't have our masterpiece or Palmer's Law of Life.
We just finished our masterpiece. We read the whole thing, and I tell you, it was worth it. I'm going to go back and listen to those myself. But I can send you the PDF if you want. Okay. But let's the consensus from everybody else. What do you guys? Steve Shargell, my man, good to see you.
I don't think it matters what you do because these are like an adjustment and they stimulate it's like a concussion of force, whether it's DD or Palmer's Law of Life. It is the concussion, and the intelligence is then stimulated through all of your expressions because you guys rock with it.
Thanks.
It's above, down, inside out.
Above, down,
That's
inside
what I
out.
love about DD. It's like, I'm thinking about the idea we don't treat pain. That is deep. Symptoms are, we lean into it. We discover more and richer from the symptoms. It's wonderful. I mean, it goes thousands of years of wisdom that is brought into the profession.
And wisdom comes from the pain sometimes. Suffering isn't, the problem. It's if we get stuck in the suffering, become the victim.
Nah.
Pasquale used to say, suffering means transformation.
Yeah.
And that stuff, it's that kick forward. What is it that's holding me back? But if it's happening, we feel, it's happening to me, we become the victim of it. And I always say, hey, I get pains too. And sometimes I go to the chiropractor when I'm in pain, but I go because my body's going to heal it, not for the chiropractor to get me out of pain, but to clear my system so my body can do what it's meant to do. Go ahead, Dwayne.
We have to remember that even though pain isn't part of what we do chiropractic for, pain informs us that something's going on. It's part of a normal system.
Yes.
We can't dismiss pain. It can inform us, but we can't let it direct us.
And we don't resist it. We don't get tight and try to fight it and get rid of it because that keeps it even worse. We relax.
Mason.
Huh?
Did you get the link, Mason?
Okay. I did. Thank you. Thank you.
Make sure that doesn't get out on the internet, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm looking at, I just went to the Dropbox of what that was. Okay. So you got that, Mason, too. Go ahead. Did somebody else have something? Forgive me, I jumped to that Dropbox. I apologize. Okay. Well, let's stay in DD then for a little while longer. Let's get through it and digest this because it's so important. I bet you that we cannot even count a single percentage of chiropractors that have read this far of Didi Palmer, let alone done this whole book. Okay. That is probably the rarest dog. I haven't even done the whole book. I've gone up to about 408 is my last note from it. And that's where I stopped. So I haven't even done the whole book, but I'm really excited to do it. So we'll just keep going here then. Sound good for everybody?
Yeah, I think practicing chiropractic benefits me more health-wise, spiritually, than the patients. We're the healthiest group around because we're doing it. We're letting it flow. We're in that expression, man. We're so lucky to be
And Santo used to say that I should be paying the patients. They do more for me than I'm doing for them.
That's
Yeah.
it. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I have an intern right now from Logan, and I had a student from Life visiting yesterday. And so we were, the three of us, and I'm really saying, your adjustment should be so clean and the best adjustment possible, because you're also receiving that back. To work on that adjustment, we're getting what we're also giving. We're receiving what we're giving, and it should be the best possible one we should get. Chiropractors aren't taught that in school. Oh, I've heard so many times. One of the reasons I'm going to Kansas City is because of the fake it till you make it. It hit the bile, hit the back of my throat. All right. And then I said, okay, we're going to Kansas City. So we're doing Kansas City. This is my shameless plug, December 3rd. January 21st, I think, is the date. Let's pick that one, and we'll do that in Sparkle City in Spartanburg. Okay. Dwayne, you can help me a little bit with that if you don't mind. I don't know Spartanburg very well.
I would love to, man. We'll talk. We'll talk.
You got it.
Can you imagine if our patients understood that whatever they're experiencing is for their benefit?
I think they're beginning to more and more.
I'll tell you, you guys, now that I can't walk as fast, now I'm able to appreciate just walking and noticing the trees. It took that.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate.
Blessed.
And so are our patients. We don't want to take away anything from their experience.
That's an important factor.
What do we know?
I heard Don Epstein say this, and it's rung out through me since I was in school. The pain goes away when it's safe to. I'm not going to rob you of that safety, is the next part I'd add to it. And that's exactly what you just said, Steve. Absolutely. Your body, it's necessary for you in this moment.
I just want to share one more thing since it's present. I'm in the cone of uncertainty, not in the cone of fear. I'm in the cone of uncertainty, and it happened before Ian, you guys.
Well, I haven't seen Dick Cantori at my neighborhood yet, but the hurricane's coming straight across, and they put a pin right at the back of my house.
I just want both of you remember, and all of us know this. Remember, there are limitations of matter to universal intelligence. So
what am I going to do?
Beware.
What am I going to do? I mean, I did everything I could possibly. I boarded the hatch, but I'm not going to live in a cone of fear. I'll go live in a cone of uncertainty and do whatever I need to do. I mean, I'll eat greens.
We have had this podcast through 2 hurricanes. With the blowing out there, we lost the internet once, and then we were done for the night. But we've gone through 2 hurricanes through this podcast, and we can go through a third. All right, we just did. I'm declaring it.
Boom.
Everybody, God bless you. Have a beautiful night. It's great seeing you, and we will see each other again soon. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.